Hi, I'm Jordan Alex Green. I write science fiction and fantasy, and I did romance under another pen name, which, unless I'm under oath on the stand, I ain't going to mention here. I also have a master's in history and a student debt to show for it, so here we go with my take on history. Now, I'm going to talk about one of the most important propaganda coups of the early abolitionist movement in Great Britain, the Wedgewood Medallion. Probably as much as anything, it helped put abolition on the map for the 18th century. But before we get to that, let's talk about what makes a successful slogan or political ad. So when you're coming up with a logo, a sales pitch, or a slogan, you need a few things if you want it to be successful. First of all, it has to be short. Nobody wants to spend an hour reading your slogan. Fewer words are better, or best, combine words and art to make the slogan immediately understandable. Okay, number 2, it has to communicate what you want. If you're selling tacos, no matter how good your slogan is, if people think it's talking about a truck, it's not doing its job. Lastly, it has to have an implicit or explicit call to action. Maybe it says, "Eat at Joe's." Maybe it just mentions how good Joe's is, and boy aren't you hungry today, leaving you to decide that you should eat at Joe's. But if it doesn't have a call to action, no matter how much the slogan impacts you, you don't know what to do with that information. And the Wedgewood Medallion did all of this in spades. It was the slogan that helped end not just the British slave trade, but slavery in the empire, and it became a fixture of the larger abolitionist movement. So in 1787, the Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade decides that they need a punchy little symbol that they could stick on their pamphlets. So they call a guy named Josiah Wedgwood. And Josiah Wedgwood was both a very successful businessman and a dedicated abolitionist, and he was the man you went to for pottery. Little symbols, little pottery medallions, anything pottery or ceramics related, he was the guy. So once Wedgwood and some of his workers, specifically an artist named William Hackwood, got to work, it wasn't long before he came back to the society with this. A kneeling slave, arms chained, looking up and asking the question, "Am I not a man and a brother?" Now remember what I said about 3 things you want for any slogan or pitch. This nailed them all. Everyone knew what the subject was because the slave trade was just that big in Britain at the time. It communicated the question, are they not men and brothers? And the call to action was pretty damned obvious. If you are a man and a brother, why are you a slave? So did this have an impact? In short, hell yes. The society and Wedgwood himself distributed these medallions at their own expense, not just in Britain, but across the Atlantic to the newly independent American colonies. And it caught on. Women wore them as brooches and hairpins. They were put on snuff boxes and pipes, and illustrated reproductions ended up on the walls of anti-slavery households. Not only did the Wedgwood Medallion convince individuals, it let those individuals act as walking advertisements for the abolitionist movement. And this helped spark some of the greatest outpourings of popular support for abolition the nation had ever seen by the last years of the 1700s and the early 1800s. It was so popular that in the 1830s, anti-slavery activists created a new design, this one of a kneeling woman with the surrounding words, "Am I not a woman and a sister?" Benjamin Franklin, for his part, stated that, "I am persuaded the medallion may have an effect equal to that of the best written pamphlet in procuring favor to those oppressed people." And he was right. There were tons of pamphlets, but they all took time to read, and the medallion didn't. You could show off your allegiance to the cause by just sticking a medallion on your jacket, something you couldn't do with a pamphlet. And this is where British abolitionism really shone. They weren't just morally right, they knew how to market that fact. They made abolitionism the cool thing in British society. In fact, they made it so cool that by 1788, many of the merchants involved in the slave trade were privately admitting that they had lost the popular debate. This was a shock given how much of the British economy was fueled by the triangular trade. In fact, workers in Bristol and Birmingham, who literally made some of the trade goods for the slave trade, in protesting against the trade, specifically called out the fact that they did not care if eliminating the trade cost them their jobs. Now, I know what some people are going to say. This was an easy sell. Of course, people know the slave trade is wrong. And the answer is no, they didn't. Before the rise of popular abolitionism in Great Britain, the slave trade, it was a type of commerce. If you were a slave trader, or the man who built the boats, made the trade goods, or insured the voyages, you could still be a respectable part of British society. The abolitionists had to sell their ideas, and the short, punchy emblem of the Wedgewood Medallion went a long way to doing exactly that. Would the slave trade have ended without this? Yeah, certainly. But I think it would have taken a lot longer to end it without this explosion of popular abolitionism. Well, that's about all we have to talk about today. Thanks for listening. If you like my jabber, hit that like button. Also, I'm sorry for the occasional pauses and stutters. I am really new at recording in my own voice.